Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming along to this afternoon's information session about writing an English Australia Conference abstract. I'm Sophie O'Keefe. I'm the Professional Development Manager at English Australia, and I'll be presenting this afternoon's webinar. So part of my role as PD Manager at English Australia is to organise the annual English Australia Conference, and I've worked on the past 6 conferences. Each year, I work with the Conference Program Committee to judge the abstract submissions, and in today's session, I'd like to share some of my insights from that process. So what will we cover today? We'll be firstly looking at the critical information about the call for papers and the abstract submissions. And then I'll move on to talk a little bit about the conference outline in the aspects that it's relevant to abstract submission and also the conference theme. Then we'll move on to the nuts and bolts of the abstracts, and we'll look at the selection criteria for abstracts and common reasons for rejection. Finally, I'll give my top 5 tips for English Australia Conference abstracts, and we'll take audience questions at the end. So if you do have questions throughout the session, please feel free to type them into the chat, but I will be addressing all questions when we get to the end of this session. So the call for papers for the conference is currently open, and it will close on the 7th of June in about 3 weeks. We'll be notifying authors about whether or not their abstract has been accepted during the week of the 12th of July. You can find all the information about the call for papers on the English Australia Conference website at the link that's there on the screen currently. So part of the information on there that you should definitely read is the call for paper information, the theme elaboration information, the abstract submission guidelines, and tips for writing a conference abstract. So there's 4 different documents, and it outlines pretty much all of the information that you'll need to know. I'll explain the judging process for the abstracts here just to demystify it. So basically each year English Australia puts together a conference program committee, and the program committee is made up of 6 members, and usually there's a member from each state branch of English Australia, and it's the job of the program committee to judge the abstracts based on the selection criteria, which are public. So obviously the abstracts that are selected based on their merit, but some elements of selection are actually out of your control, because we also try to create a very balanced program that includes something for everyone in ELICOS across all the different departments. So for example, if we get 2 teaching and learning abstracts that are very similar, both excellent, we'll end up choosing between the 2 of them. So because firstly, there'd be too much duplication. And secondly, we'd like to have a balance of different types of themes and topics in our program. We also tried to create a balance of different provider types and make sure that all provider types are represented on the program, from private providers to university providers, right through to TAFE providers as well. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the conference structure in 2021. Now, I realize that there's a 2020 program up on the screen, but I'm going to use this as an example because the 2021 conference will be very similar in structure to the 2020 conference. So again, in 2021, we're running a virtual conference, and this decision was made based on really accessibility. We wanted to maximize accessibility to the conference for people working in the ELICOS sector this year, and we realized that PD budgets are very slim. So we've decided to go with a virtual conference that's free. So this is just an example of one of the days of the conference from 2020. you'll see that, and the days will be run in a similar way this year. You'll see that it has an opening plenary at 3 p.m. and then at 3:45 an awards ceremony. Then there's a quick break. And then after that, there are 2 breakout streams, each of which have 2 30-minute sessions. And it's those breakout streams where we include the abstracted sessions. So if you are thinking of submitting an abstract for the conference and you're accepted, then your session would be included in one of the breakout streams. This year, we will be having 3 breakout streams and not 2. We had 2 last year, but this year we'll be running 3. So the conference theme for 2021 is 360 degrees, reflections, transformations, and new perspectives. It's obviously a COVID-related theme. And I think the quote at the bottom of the screen now really sums up the theme and what we hope it invokes for people. So we've all obviously experienced a great deal of change in the past 14 months, and the position we find ourselves in now is very different to what it was 12 months ago when colleges were scrambling to move online and when we were all in the midst of emergency remote teaching. I think the key questions that the theme raises are, firstly, what have we learned over the past 14 months? Secondly, how will these learnings inform our approaches to course and service delivery? And thirdly, what are our visions for the future? How do we imagine a future incorporating everything that we've learned? So when I showed you the conference program before, you will have noticed that there were different streams. And basically, we break the conference up into different areas. Those areas are teaching and learning, assessment, management, marketing and admissions, and student services and engagement. When you submit your abstract, you'll be asked to choose which stream you're submitting the abstract for. And then the program committee chooses a balance of abstracts across all of the areas. And if you go to the theme elaboration document that's included on the English Australia website, it actually gives a lot of examples of ways in which the theme might be interpreted and topics people might consider presenting on. So under teaching and learning, it lists a whole list of areas that you might consider presenting on. Obviously, you could present on other areas outside of those examples, but the theme elaboration points really hope to give people ideas of what they might present on. All right, so let's move on to the submission guidelines for the abstracts. So again, these guidelines are listed on our website. Really, the nuts and bolts stuff is that the abstract should be a maximum of 250 words and the title a maximum of 15 words. So for the abstracted sessions this year, all sessions will be 30 minutes. And that's including 5 minutes of question time. So we call it a 25+5 session. Each year, typically, English Australia receives around 90 to 100 abstracts for its conference. In 2020, we received around 60, obviously with everything that was going on. I'm imagining it might be a similar number in 2021. So it is very competitive, and I really do encourage you to follow these submission guidelines to maximize your chance of your abstract being accepted. So, what are the selection criteria for abstracts. The first selection criteria is that the abstract and the presentation must be relevant to the conference theme. So we spoke about the theme before, and you will have noticed that it's quite broad. So hopefully it should be easy to incorporate it into any abstract or presentation. And the incorporation should be done in a meaningful way and not just tacked on. So before you sit down and write your abstract and conceptualize your presentation, really think about how you can embed the theme and the core principles of the theme into what you're going to write. I wanted to say a short word about the titles of the presentations, which you will need to include when you submit your abstract. The titles don't need to include the theme words. So something that often happens is when we receive the abstracts, 50 to 60% of them have the conference theme words included in them. And then that makes it really difficult for us, because then we have to get back to presenters who are accepted onto the program and ask them to change their title, because if we had every single title in our program with the same 3 or 4 words included in it, it would be firstly very dull, but also very confusing. So yeah, I guess just bear in mind that you don't need to include the theme words in your abstract title. I said before that I'd talk about common reasons for rejection, and I'm going to do this based on each of the selection criteria. So for this one, a common reason for rejection would be that the abstract doesn't address the conference theme at all. So each year, for example, we get people submitting abstracts based on their PhDs, and these people come from all over the world. And it seems that they may submit a very generic abstract to a lot of conferences, and it's very evident to us that their submission does not address our conference theme, because they really haven't tailored it to our conference. Okay, so moving on to the second selection criteria. Abstract should be relevant to current issues or challenges affecting ELICOS. So abstracts that often stand out to the program committee present the latest concepts or techniques or tools or trends in ELICOS, or they may present a current issue or challenge and solutions to these. So the 2020 conference had some really great examples of this, with the move to online teaching and online delivery. And we saw that most of the abstracts that were submitted really were about, the latest issues or challenges and solutions to these. So that was great to see. You can find all of the abstracts for the 2020 conference on the English Australia website at that link that I put up before. So if you click into the 2020 conference link, you'll be able to open up the program. And then if you click on the titles of each of the sessions on the program, their abstract will open up. So I encourage you to read some of the abstracts from the 2020 conference. So a common reason for rejection of abstracts is that the proposal might be really interesting, but it's not really relevant to what's top of mind or to any of the hot topics of the day. So just to give you an example of this, perhaps someone last year submitted an abstract on teaching pronunciation through song in a face-to-face classroom. Someone else submitted an abstract on teaching pronunciation in online environments. And the second one was scored much higher in relevance to current issues or challenges facing ELICOS than the first one. Okay, so the third selection criteria is that abstracts should have fresh or new content or a fresh look at a perennial topic. So the presentations that we're looking for the conference really should introduce new information, new ideas, new ways of doing things. And they shouldn't cover ground that's common knowledge in ALICOS or that's widely accessible elsewhere. So for example, new approaches to teaching and learning, or a new initiative or a new course at your college would be very interesting. We've also included a fresh look at a perennial topic because we realise that obviously there are the age eternal theories and topics in ALICOS, but that people come at them from new angles from time to time. And an example of this from last year's conference was one of the teachers did a session about peer observations. And he included the use of pineapple charts for online peer observations, which we thought was kind of a new area of peer observations. So that was, a good example of a fresh look at a perennial topic. Last year, there was also a session by some teachers from University of Wollongong, and they did a session on professional development for teachers, which I'd say is a perennial topic, but they talked about professional development for teachers who know everything. So they kind of came at it from a new or a fresh angle. And a common reason for rejection according to this criteria, is that abstracts are submitted that go over well-established territory, and there's no kind of new element that's very apparent to the program committee. Another common reason for rejection is that, yes, people submit something that's a new idea, but it comes across as a real sales pitch. So every year we receive abstracts that are based on new apps that someone has developed, or some new software that people have developed. And the English Australia Conference actually has a non-commercial policy. So if we feel that an abstract is a sales pitch, then the abstract won't be included on the program. However, we do have a special stream on the English Australia Conference program, which is called the information stream. And if you want to showcase a product or a service, then you can get in touch with us and you can be placed into the information stream. And I guess the difference with that stream is that everybody who attends those sessions knows that those sessions are a commercial session. So the fourth selection criterion for the abstracts is that they should be underpinned by sound pedagogical or methodological principles. And this is where it's applicable. This is, for us, probably the most difficult of all of them to judge when we come to judging the abstracts, because sometimes I guess it's not always applicable to every abstract or to every presentation. But where applicable, your approach should be underpinned by evidence-based research and sound English language teaching principles. So we want to be confident that the approaches that you're presenting are based on good practice. People often ask me if English Australia Conference abstracts need to be based on research. And the answer is definitely not. We do often have presentations about research, but our conference is really a practical industry conference. And we like to have practical sessions that will be useful for people in a practical sense as well. So we often include sessions which are case studies, or sessions which are practical solutions to issues or problems. Examples of good practice sessions, and they normally talk about why it's good practice, or even new initiatives that you or your college have been working on over the past year. So a common reason for rejection is that people submit an abstract which is based on research, which is absolutely fine, but they don't include ideas for practical application of that research in an ELICOS context, or ideas for, takeaways for their audience, because I think people really want to leave a session with some practical takeaways that they can take back to their college and implement. So if you are submitting a research-based abstract, make sure that you do include and consider practical application for the audience. Okay, our penultimate selection criterion is that the abstract must be relevant and engaging to an ELICOS audience. It seems pretty self-evident, but I think it's still important to note that the abstract must be relevant specifically to an ELICOS audience working in Australia. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't accept abstracts from people who are based in other countries, but usually when we do, it's very clear that that person has an understanding of the ELICOS sector in Australia and our needs. So a common reason for rejection is that an abstract comes in, but it's too general. So, for example, I was speaking before about the generic type abstracts based on research that come in, but it's really not relevant to an Australian context. Okay, and the final selection criterion is that the abstract and the session needs to have clear take-home benefits for delegates. So I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting with the program committee and they've been skimming through different abstracts, and people have said, oh, look, this one talks about the toolkit that people come away with, or this one talks about the take-home benefit. And really, it's something that jumps out as a real benefit for abstracts, because it shows that the session will also have some take-home benefits for delegates. So as I said, our conference is a really practical industry-based event, and abstracts need to indicate the take-home benefits and what they are for delegates. A common reason for rejection is that an abstract is submitted about research or a new initiative, for example, but it's so specific to that college or to that university that it really wouldn't be useful for other colleges. So in those cases, it's difficult for the committee to see what the clear take-home benefits are. All right, so I've been talking for a while now. So I'd like to share an example of an abstract from the 2020 English Australia Conference. And I'd like you to do a short activity. So when I display the abstract, I'd like you to read through it and think about the selection criteria that we've just discussed, and say, for this abstract, which of those selection criteria you would give a high score, or which of them it demonstrates. So the theme for last year's conference, because you'll need to know that because that was one of the selection criteria, was resilience and reinvention. So if you can think about how this abstract demonstrates the selection criteria, and then just type the criteria in that you think the abstract is demonstrating into the chat, that would be great. All right, so when you're ready, if you could just type into the chat. So Ross has said criteria 2, relevant and hot topic. I absolutely agree with that. Okay, Richard said it's not relevant, it's too general. Are there any of the other criteria that this one achieves really well? So the theme for the conference was resilience and reinvention. Yeah, Kaylee said that it definitely fits reinvention. I agree. Yep, Ross thinks criteria 5, relevant and engaging. Absolutely, especially for colleges who teach direct entry programs. I also think it fulfills the criteria 6 of take-home benefits, although it's not, yeah, Ross has said that, although they don't sort of take it to town and explicitly talking about it. I think the last sentence really addresses the take-home benefits and the discussion or ideas that they'd like people to walk away with. Yep. So this abstract was obviously accepted. Yeah. So Russ has said there's no actual toolbox, but definitely benefits by way of a conversation. And I think that's a really good point. When we hold the English Australia conference face to face, we run workshop sessions, and it's much easier for participants to come away with a toolkit from a workshop session. So these are 30-minute sessions and virtual. So, it can be a little difficult, and maybe toolkits, the wrong word, but it could be difficult for people to develop full toolkits in that time. But certainly discussions or thoughts around a new topic to stimulate that. And I think this one does that really well. I'm going to pop up another abstract, and this one is from the 2019 conference. And the theme was engage, include, adapt. And again, if you could just type into the chat which criteria you think this one fulfills very well, that would be great. Great. So Russ has said criteria 4, underpinned by sound methodological principles. Absolutely. And he's also said it links to engagement and motivation. Yeah. So I think in that sense, it also fulfills the conference theme, which was engage, include, adapt. Great. And I really like how both of the abstracts that I've shown you start off by setting the context or the scene for the presentation in their first paragraph. And then in the second paragraph, they move on to talking about the presentation. So that's a really common formula for writing an abstract and one that works really well. Okay, great. Well, thanks for doing those activities with me. So to finish off, I'd like to just give you my top 5 tips for writing an English Australia conference abstract. So the first one, clearly articulate the learning outcomes and the value for your audience. In a way, your abstract is selling your session to the audience. And when they read it, it really should make them excited about coming to see your session. So really think about how to include key takeaways in your abstract. The second tip is think about your audience and how to pitch your session to them. So imagine your audience contexts. What do they already know? What do you need to explain in more detail? How can you make your session engaging for this audience? My third tip is read abstracts from previous conferences. So I mentioned before that you can find the abstracts for the 2020 English Australia Conference on our website. And I'd really recommend reading through 10 or so abstracts to get a feel for how they've been written and to use them as models. Next, make sure your abstract accurately reflects your presentation content. I can't tell you how disappointing it is when you read an abstract and you decide that you want to go to that session and not to another session that's on at the same time. And then you get to the presentation and it really isn't similar to what was in the abstract. So just remember that the abstract you write will be published in the conference program and people will be making decisions about which sessions to attend based on the abstract. So you need to be true to what you've written in your abstract when you present the session. And my last tip, ensure that your title can stand alone. I think my impression is that only 50% of people who attend conferences nowadays read the abstracts, and the other 50% just attend sessions based on the titles of the sessions. So make sure that your title is descriptive enough that it can stand alone. Make sure it uses keywords that reflect content of your session. Don't use the theme unnecessarily in the title. Try and include an element that's original or catchy so that it draws people in, but make sure it's not too quirky or obscure that it doesn't really explain what your session is about. So I've just got an example at the bottom of the screen there of a title from a session from the 2020 conference, Sustainable Solutions for Testing Times, Integrated Skills Testing to Maximize Academic Integrity Online. And I liked this one because it's kind of got a cute play on words, testing times, but really it explains very well what the session is about. Okay, well, that's it from me in terms of the presentation, but I would like to take audience questions now. So if you have any questions, could you please type them into the chat now? Fire away. I'll just wait another 5 seconds to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, so Richard has asked if English Australia would consider allowing shorter sessions, so 15-minute quick show and tell sessions. It's a really good question. Richard, at the face-to-face conference, we had started to run poster sessions, which were shorter sessions, and they were kind of exactly that, a show and tell. You had a poster, and there were rapid fire flash talk sessions, we called them. We haven't included them for the conference this year, but potentially, if we're not sort of bombarded with abstracts, we may go out with a second round call for shorter sessions. But to be honest, I don't think that that's going to happen. There is an EdTech symposium that's being run by the English Australia EdTech Special Interest Group this year. That's happening in July. And they have rapid fire sessions, which are 15 minutes. So if you're interested in that shorter 15-minute format, and it's an EdTech topic, then that could be an option. But yeah, it's a nice suggestion. Okay, I can't see any more questions coming through. However, if any occur to you, then please feel free to drop me an email. So that's my email up on the screen. Can be anything at all. And otherwise, good luck if you are considering submitting an abstract. And thanks for coming along today.